Emma Frame here, and welcome to Voices of Yoga podcast, co-hosted with Lindsay Porter, where we bring you inspiring yoga stories and insights from yogis and teachers from around the world. These stories highlight the benefits of yoga and encourage those who maybe haven't started yoga yet to get started, and for the more experienced to delve deeper. We hope you enjoy. This is podcast number 148 and video podcast number 17.
So welcome, this is Lindsay Porter of Voices of Yoga today. Welcome to our latest podcast. And I'm delighted today to introduce our guest. It's going to be Avi Sharma, who's a general practitioner, a GP, currently based in Scotland, and he has a passion for yoga, fitness and lifestyle medicine. So Avi was born in Wales, now lives in Scotland and has Indian heritage. And I'm really looking forward to finding out more about all the things Avi knows and does as both a yoga practitioner and a medical practitioner and other things beyond that. So welcome, Avi, to Voices of Yoga today.
Hi, Lindsay. Thanks so much for having me along. I'm very happy to be here.
Lovely, thank you. So Avi, we always like to start when we introduce our guests by asking them to share a little bit about their story of how they found themselves journeying on the yoga path. Would you like to enlighten us all with your story?
Yeah, no problem. Well, I was firstly going to say, I've really enjoyed listening to your podcast over the last few weeks and months and hearing and learning about yourself, Emma, and your interesting guests. So I thought I'd like to split it, if I may, into maybe one, why I started the yoga, two, the benefits it's brought to my life, and then maybe three, just bring that together as to what my vision is for yoga, both being a GP and a yoga teacher.
Well, I'd love that, please.
Okay. So just to give, starting as to why I got into yoga, just to give some context, I'm 40 years old. And I've always had an interest in sports from a young age. If it's tennis, it's football, it's circuit training, maybe a bit of boxing, a bit of strength training over the past decade. And so my yoga journey probably started in 2014. I was 34 years old. I had a decent level of fitness, but I had a recurring knee injury. I had a chronic ligament injury. I had a torn cartilage, which is the meniscus on both sides of my knee. And this came from years of twisting and turning from playing football. At the worst of it, at times I would struggle to walk about 50 yards, probably the width of a football pitch, and that was a lot to take. I still wanted to, I had to stop because of pain or my knee would give way. Now, I still played football because it was my release, it was my go-to, and frankly, I didn't want to give it up. But it came at a cost, and the cost was the next 5 to 7 days. I would have so much pain, stiffness, and instability in my knee. And for anyone of any age, that's not, or any level of activity, it's just not a nice feeling. I'd had previous surgery to the knee, and I did everything correct by pre-op physio, post-op physio, but it still never felt right. I had another private consultation, and the decision was to go for surgery. In the meantime, I thought, why don't I look at those who've played football for the longest? So I went right to the top. Ryan Giggs played at the highest level in the Premiership till age 40. What did he do? He did hot yoga. Now, let's be clear. When I was 34 years old, I, like many others, knew very little about yoga, other than it involved some stretching. And yeah, it was probably good for you. So went home, Googled hot yoga. And that week, 23rd of April 2014, I attended my first Bikram yoga class in the West End of Glasgow. This is also known as the original hot yoga or the 2062 sequence. I know you're familiar with it. I heard about you talking, you've been to a class on one of the other podcasts, and it's a 90-minute class. And it's practiced in the heat. I immediately fell in love with this practice. During my first class, I have honestly felt stronger with every class I've taken to that knee since. And in 6 months, a combination of strength training and this yoga twice a week fully rehabilitated my knee. And I was very grateful to be able to cancel the surgery. Present day, I can run harder and faster than I ran in my 20s. I have no problem with twisting and turning. And when we go on holiday, my wife and I, we like to walk. We'll sometimes walk 2 to 3 hours and get a coffee. And I can manage that no problems. If I do it for maybe 5 days back to back, I'll maybe feel a slight ache, but it's day and night to where I was. So that's really why I got in terms of the benefits. Then clearly the rehabilitation to my knee was dramatic. Out with the maybe more expected benefits, more balance in every area of my life, flexibility, strength, calmness of the mind, which all came. I felt the most notable benefit was focus and concentration. You know, it was in every area, so from my work and at home. And when I look back to being at university, I used to go to the library for 2-3 hours at a time, and my productivity was pretty poor. Now, if I have 15 or 20 minutes to take part in any kind of learning activity, read, I just make that work more effectively for me. And maybe that comes with a bit of maturity, maybe being a wee bit wiser, but overall, I'm a less easily distracted person. And I put that down to some of the discipline that we get from a yoga class. I've found new connection. I've entered a whole new community or tribe, as they call it, yoga family, both locally and internationally. And it's interesting whenever you join a new group or a new activity, meet a new bunch of people, when they find out that you're a GP or a doctor, the conversation that can occasionally go down the route of, do you mind having a quick look at my shoulder? Right? While you're here, do you want to just have a wee look at this rash? You know, and I joke because it's funny and it's the truth, but actually it's always so humbling. You know, for me to know that anyone, be it a patient, be it a friend, a family member, just values my opinions. So I never take that for granted. But what was different here was I would come out these yoga classes and the conversation was something I hadn't heard before, because the question was, so you're a GP, yeah? And rather than, can you have a look at my problem? It was now, well, I used to have a frozen shoulder and it bothered me for years, but now I've got a full range of movement and I'm pain-free. Yeah. I used to be a very poorly controlled diabetic, but now on medication alone, but I'm now no longer classed as a diabetic. And probably some of the most dramatic ones where I used to be dependent on alcohol and drugs, but I'm now 3 years fully sober and there's not been a hint of a relapse. Now, each of these people, which are just a few of the kind of anecdotal stories that we all know, they claimed their achievements were purely down to consistently turning up for the yoga practice. And that clearly drove my interest. You know, I've got a yoga sequence here that has such a profound effect on a person's health, and it's fully accessible to anyone, regardless of their starting fitness, flexibility, strength, associated medical condition, even their age, that simply requires their breath and moving in a safe and controlled way. And one of our senior teachers, her name's Dan Ducharme, she has a great line: the only requirement for this class is to breathe. Everything else is optional. So it's really as a truly beginner's class. So it eventually led me to go in the 9-week teacher training in Thailand in November 2016. And I've since been really fortunate. I've managed to expand my practice and my teaching across the globe. I've managed to be teaching in Australia, the States, Mexico, Hong Kong, Beijing, Dubai, and of course back in Bonnie, Scotland. So in Glasgow, Stirling, and in Edinburgh. And I think you've probably felt the same. And on your journey, you get to meet so many inspirational students, teachers, and mentors along the way. And that kind of leads me to part 3. I apologize for the long answer, but how this fairly accelerated journey, because I'm still very new to this, has really shaped my vision for yoga as a GP and as a yoga teacher. And it's very simple. I want as wide a population as possible to have access to safe, affordable yoga. And that was the vision from day one. But since March 2020, that has increased for me 100-fold with what COVID has brought. I mean, never has there been a more important time for each of us to take ownership of our own health, as it ultimately is our responsibility. Yoga will help you achieve this. And the idea is not that yoga is to replace modern medicine. It's absolutely not. It's to work in conjunction and support the healthcare systems wherever you may be. And I really believe if you give yoga a chance, you're going to build your patience, your determination, your focus. And typically, you may have found this, Lindsay, at the beginning, the physical benefits come quite quickly, which is great. And then the calming of the mind will follow. But for myself, I feel the goal should be more self-care and compassion for yourself. And in achieving this, you will in turn then allow the best version of yourself to be able to offer more care and compassion for those around you. So on my journey right now, I would say I've never been happier. And despite the many curveballs that life will always throw at all of us, I feel very blessed to have two jobs that I love, and both as a GP and a yoga teacher, which are both able to help people.
Wow. Avi, there was just so much in that answer. It's absolutely fantastic. That's like a whole interview in itself there. And and you asked many questions that I think that people would have to a medical practitioner, you know, becoming a yogi. A couple of things I wanted to expand on though. First,
absolutely.
Comment and just say, I actually really like it when I know somebody's in the yoga room, whether I'm tutoring or just teaching a class, if somebody is medically trained, because you know what, it makes me really go on my A game about my anatomy and when I describe things. And I know it can be a little bit, oh, I hope I get it right, but I always say, if anybody in the room is anatomy trained, keep me right. But I like that aspect, you know, because it's good for yoga teachers to be
absolutely.
The other thing that I'm interested in just maybe unpacking a little bit more, really interesting, you talked about yoga and it brought you into this physical well-being sense. Some people, and I'm sure you get this question quite often, when you get a medically trained person in the room that's into yoga, people often sort of hone in and ask you, what do you make of the spiritual side? You know, if you're scientifically trained, do you discard that, or is there somewhere that you accept there's energetic work? Where do you sort of sit in that spectrum of thought?
Where do I sit? No, I've clearly got a science background. There's no debate to that. But to have a spiritual side, absolutely. You know, I believe in God. I pray at night. You know, everyone's going to have their different connection, and I think as long as you're not shoving something in someone's face and really kind of making them kind of have to believe, and that's, you can apply this to absolutely anything. So for me, the main things about yoga, and for the more I've learned about this, it seems to be a similar path. A lot of people come because of the physical benefits they want to get, or even the effects on their mind, and then just as a natural osmosis, a spiritual level will develop. You know, I used to never really understand when they said the energy in the room, whereas now when you teach, it's absolutely so real. And even probably just before I went to teacher training, there was classes where you could definitely feel that energy in the room. So no, I'm a very open person, you know, and I don't ever like to kind of cut something off. And yeah, I think I've definitely got more of a spiritual side the more I've got into the yoga.
Lovely. And I think that's really confirming, really reassuring to hear. So from your perspective then, they both coexist, the scientific side and the more spiritual side, or however you describe that.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
That's made my evening.
We can pack up and go home now. No, not at all.
So Avi, something that's obviously been a lot more of public debate, and we see it more in the media recently in the last maybe couple of years, is about this idea of prescribing, social prescribing on the NHS, allowing doctors to send patients, if you like, off to try things like a yoga practice or a yoga session. Now, I know you've been quite involved in this and you've been doing your own research and courses. I just wonder if you could share a bit more about this, what it is, where does the world of medicine stand on this right now? Yeah,
no, absolutely. It's like the $1 million question in the yoga world, isn't it? How do you get yoga on prescription? So basically social prescribing, it exists just now, and maybe for some of your listeners that are unfamiliar with the term, that's a community referral, and that enables a GP, an advanced nurse practitioner, a healthcare professional to refer people to a range of non-clinical services. So that could be anything from a community group, a new activity, a club, even things like legal advice, volunteers helping around the house. So it's not just limited to yoga. This process starts at your GP practice, and there should be a link worker who will listen to the person's individual needs and then work out where's the best place to help this person. And this is a proven approach that helps people who are struggling with isolation, feeling lonely, or really feeling stressed out due to their work, their finances, more than medication alone. So for me, I believe attending yoga classes could be one of the key options for social prescribing. As yoga's many benefits, ultimately, I feel it empowers an individual with the tools, and that's to help them take better ownership of their health. And those kind of tools, it's confidence, it's patience, it's calmness, it's perspective and clarity. The issue is, where does the GP, the healthcare worker, or the link worker refer the patient to? Which yoga class? Because there's so many different styles, each with their own unique aspects and each with their own individual benefits. And it's similar to when a patient used to leave a surgery and they'd been advised, go do some exercise. And it's open to so much interpretation, the door would close behind, and then a patient would be standing there, and it's like, well, do I go to a gym? Do I go and get a personal trainer? Do I go swimming? Do I walk the dog? Do I climb the stairs? Am I more limited with mobility? And that over the years has been better clarified now with the World Health Organization. The guidelines of an average 18 to 64-year-old should be doing 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic physical activity, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity in a week. And you would want to have some strength training in there. So now, because those guidelines are there, it gives a bit more of a structure, even to a personal trainer or to a gym, as to how to advise a patient. So looking into that deeper, it led me to complete the Yoga for Health training in November 2019. And that's led by two pioneers bringing yoga into the NHS, Heather Mason and Paul Fox. And their 10-week evidence-based yoga protocol as a social prescribing intervention aims to reduce healthcare service usage. And it also incorporates chair yoga, which within its sequence, and that's great for the frailer groups, those that are more elderly, or those with maybe a limited range of movement or mobility issues. I don't know, do you know much about Yoga for Health? Have you been involved much with them at all?
Nathan on Voices of Yoga, but it was a few years ago now, so it's wonderful how everything is rolling along and developing and evolving.
Yeah, well, they're a great bunch, and now they're a registered charity. But I feel the Yoga for Health guys have probably made the most progress in terms of a specific type of sequence been introduced formally into the NHS, and they have some evidence base behind it. For me, look, I believe in any type of movement, as long as it's safe. I always say I'm more concerned when someone stops moving. It's more important that it's accessible, whatever the activity is, that it's accessible to the widest range of population. And I genuinely believe, look, as a society, we could impact a massive part of our lifestyle-related illness. So these are things like heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, some cancers, osteoarthritis, mental health disease, the non-communicable diseases, if we prioritize sleep, nutrition, exercise, relaxation, and yoga into our daily lives.
Lovely. And Avi, you talked about social prescribing there. I just wanted to understand, is that the same across the UK, whether you're in England, Scotland, Wales?
So no, they're probably further. The guidelines will change. It depends when this comes out. So you would have to check what your, even within your local districts, there might be some differences. Sometimes the link workers can be quite hard to find, and I know this because I'm a locum GP in between quite a few surgeries, and when I first heard of the term link worker, I tried to kind of source it out. So I think we're getting closer to a point where it's more evenly spread across the UK, but there are some differences in England and Scotland.
Nice, thank you. So there's obviously been a lot of big changes this year for many of us, and I was interested just to explore a little bit with you your obligations in terms of being a locum GP and supporting your communities and your patients, and being a yoga teacher. What sort of changes have you had to make, those two things side by side? Has it become more difficult? How's that journey been for you?
With what COVID's brought in and everything, well, I think the biggest impact to us immediately were my wife and I were actually on a 10-day break in Spain in March, and within a few days, the country, along with most of the world, went into lockdown. So we were stuck out there for a lot longer than expected. And thankfully, God willing, we were safe, and family back home were, for the large part, safe. So we would have had no way to come home and support them. So that was certainly scary times. But what did it bring? In terms of teaching, it brought this online platform as the studios were closed, and thankfully being able to adapt to a change is something that I've had to become comfortable with working in the healthcare service. So I do totally appreciate that's not something that comes naturally to everyone, and you might have seen it yourself, maybe a bit of resistance to going online, which is understandable. You know, I was worried that people would lose the benefits of their regular practice and not be able to get to the studio. And I was also admittedly slightly hesitant on my first class that I practiced. In fact, I didn't like it. I'll be honest. I remember telling my wife, that's not for me. And I mean, the scary thing for me was my knee actually felt sore. And this is the same one. It still felt strong, but it felt an ache. And I hadn't felt that for years, you know, out with kind of unusual experiences like walking 7 days a week or something. And I missed the heat. I missed the mirror, because the yoga class we normally has a mirror in front. But after I practiced a few classes, I quickly realized that the problem was not about class. The problem was very much myself and my mindset. When I let go of all these things that I was missing and probably felt to an extent that I needed, I was able to focus on the opportunity at hand. And that's the opportunity to take 90 minutes out to silence the noise and the pressures of the day, to develop more focus and concentration than probably ever before, because I'm now truly moving with every word of the instruction without the visual cues, and being humble to be able to take a few steps back and just build the foundation, like a more solid foundation to my practice. And also to show gratitude. You know, I mean, I was still able to connect, despite being stuck in Spain, with studios, teachers, students, families, our friends back home, and now also their pets and stuff as well, because of the online classes. So when I changed that thought process, my online practice flourished. Teaching was different. Teaching, I love that right from the get-go. Online specifically, I witnessed firsthand how these online classes have reached people who would previously never have gone near a yoga studio or even considered trying it. Now, that could be for financial costs, through not having the time, through confidence issues, childcare issues, or just living too far away. And it's been great to see those with perceived restrictions just simply giving it a go. You know, I think it's been more importantly to see them and hear about their benefits in such a short period of time. But coming to what you said in terms of the changes that's brought on, it's been changes for everyone, myself included, and they've been significant. So when I returned from Spain, I had to make a huge decision. And that was, for the foreseeable future, I'll only be teaching now and practicing online rather than in the studios. And that's a huge decision for me to make. For the last 6 years, me driving 45 minutes to a yoga studio is like second nature, you know, and I've gained so much from that hot room. But for a variety of reasons, and particularly given the current pandemic situation, there is a potential transmission risk that I could pose to patients, students, staff going directly from a GP shift straight to a studio, or vice versa. And working as a GP in such a variety of situations, like I sometimes come into contact with some of the most vulnerable people in society, you know, from the very elderly to those with multiple chronic morbidities and those at end of life care. And I have a duty of care to minimize that potential transmission risk. I don't know if it's going to be like this forever, but it's a decision I've had to make for now. You'll be aware of the changes that, or most people will, that have happened in GP surgeries as well. I think maybe your listeners will found this, that it's quite hard now to get a face-to-face GP appointment. And that's been moved now more into telephone consultations and video consultations. And I mention this reduced access for two reasons. I think it's important to touch on these. Look, one, as a patient, this is the time where being more involved in your care is absolutely paramount. Prioritize your sleep, your diet, your exercise, your relaxation, and watch what an effect that will have on every area of your life, from your mood, your stress levels, your chronic pain, or even your blood pressure and diabetic control. And taking that further, look, when within a few days of developing a new mild symptom, I'm not saying go and become Dr. Google, okay, because that brings harm at times as well, but having a quick look at reputable websites, just for a few minutes, NHS website, patient.co.uk, where you'll get clear, safe advice, that could save you unnecessary anxiety of being that person that's unable to get through in the GP lines all morning. Mm-hmm. You've also got a range of your pharmacist, your dentist, your optician, you've got helplines like Breathing Space, the Samaritans, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I just feel these areas you may be able to get some initial advice, or even sometimes more expert advice for what you're needing for both your physical health and your mental health. Now, clearly, if your symptoms are severe or you're unsure, you need to get further help, and that's always your GP or NHS 24 on 111 or phone in 999 if it's severe chest pain. That goes without saying, but I'm just aware that it's seeming that sometimes people are a wee bit unsure of where to go, even all these guys that have been doing great work, like really helping their neighbours and their elderly relatives. So it's just to maybe point them in a direction. So that was one point about the reduced access. My second point one is actually slightly more important, and that is, while this reduced access exists, please do not think you cannot see your GP. Your GP surgery is still open. And I've seen a few cases, unfortunately, where people just didn't want to burden the system, and they've left unexplained symptoms for 4, maybe 5 months. Wow. You have to be clear, serious medical conditions still exist out with COVID. So if you're in doubt, just, that's what we are here for as healthcare professionals, and probably the last thing I want to say on that, it's also still important for every one of us that are on the lines, receptionist staff, and the patient or the carer phoning in. Look, every one of us has to be mindful when speaking on that phone, just to maintain that level of respect and consider the stress for the other person on the other side. And I think if everyone does that, we'll all just move in the right direction, or keep moving in that direction.
Thank you. It's so helpful to expand all that as well. So I'm sure our listeners found that really useful. Always good to have those reminders and help us be clear about where we need to be to keep ourselves safe. Avi, what else would you like to share with us about your particular yoga journey or yoga teaching journey today?
In terms of, actually, could I maybe just put one thing just about COVID since we're here? Would that be all right? Yeah. So it's just purely, I'm not sure when this will air in terms of this, but I do some work in the kind of COVID advice shifts, and any opportunity I have to just make it a bit clear on what folk can do just now. Would that be all right if I just did a couple of points? Yeah. I just wanted to just clarify, look, it's been a really difficult time for everyone, for either the direct health effects on yourself, on others, or maybe the impact it's having on your job, your business, your home, and your well-being. And the bad news is it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, especially as the winter approaches. The good news is there are things you can do. And for me, I think going over the absolute basics is important. Look, if you're struggling for time, as everyone seems to be, I don't have 90 minutes, I don't have 60 minutes, I don't have 15 minutes. You do have 1 minute to take 5 deep breaths in the morning. Now, I can't stress this enough. So many different techniques exist. You can try the 3-4-5 technique. So breathe in for 3 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, and exhale for 5 seconds. And if you do that 5 times, you're in a minute. So yoga might not be for everyone, but taking time for those deep breaths in the morning certainly is. And these deep breaths are similar to the techniques that they use in intensive care units, when patients are being rehabilitated. So it's an opportunity to do it. The other thing I want to mention was just about movement. Trying not to lie around all day on our backs, because this can close off those tiny airways, mainly at the bases of the lungs. And the majority of your lungs, as you'll know, are at the back of the torso. So getting up and being up and about, even just turning, if that's difficult for you, or just lying in your front, is going to just help by keeping those tiny airways more open, which will be very useful for you if, unfortunately, you do get a respiratory illness. So I just think with these breaths, you're building your respiratory and lung health to ultimately fight a respiratory illness, but you're also calming your mind and just getting the best start to your day. Anxiety and worrying about this situation is probably the most common thing we're seeing in general practice. So that calming effect can be key. So I would say make it like brushing your teeth, 5 breaths in the morning. And then the other site is NHS Inform. If people haven't been to it, it's worth checking out. There is a mnemonic there called FACTS. I think if people haven't heard of it, it's just F for face coverings, A for avoiding crowded places, C, clean your hands thoroughly and regularly, T, your 2-meter distance, and S, self-isolate and book a test if you have symptoms. So that would just be my wee thing about being safe at this time.
That was great reminders. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No problems. But yeah, so you also want to know about the
any other things to share about your own yoga teacher or yoga journey as a practitioner?
My own journey. Okay. So I would say the biggest thing I've learned in my yoga journey, and I think this is something that everyone can improve on, and I'm still working on it, is just to have an open mind. I think it applies to everyone, be it if you're new to an activity or yoga or those, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're brand new or you're an experienced practitioner. It's important not to be afraid to try something new or different. You don't have to resist it because you've heard something or based on other people's opinions or even your own preconceptions, because you're not that other person and this experience may be completely different for you. And even if it looks like it's out with your comfort zone, you might just surprise yourself. So I think every experienced practitioner, expert, champion in any area of life has to be a beginner at some point, and everyone has faced those same worries and initial fears. The difference between these guys is they've just been consistent and they have put the work in. So I would say that if you want to get the most from your yoga practice or any activity you're taking, consistency, whatever that is it once a week, is it twice a week, 3 times a week, thank yourself for doing something, but just keep that going for whatever your desired outcome is. And I think with so many different styles, there's no one perfect exercise, yoga style, breathing technique. Each activity has its own benefits, and that's going to be resonant with certain individuals and less so with others. But you have to start by being open to it and genuinely giving it a chance. I personally say 20 classes before you make an opinion. And I just think if you make a judgment after 1 to 2 classes, it just defeats the purpose of what the potential you have to gain. And I guess the way I look at it, you probably didn't love swimming or driving or your first day of work, within that first time. So they would be the main things I would say about my journey.
That's great, thank you. So I'd like to ask this question from a point of view coming from as a yoga teacher.
Yep.
How is it, or where do you stand professionally? You're teaching yoga classes and you've obviously got people coming to join you. If you have seen them or you recognise them in that relationship as the medical practitioner or physician, as a GP for them, how do you respond to that? Does it depend on what they say? Do you sort of act as if you don't know them because there needs to be professional boundaries? How does that work in reality?
That's an interesting question. That's like meeting someone in the street. So I would say no different. You have to be guided by the situation. Everything's going to be different. I certainly would never breach confidentiality in any way when I meet someone, and I would probably be guided by more the conversation they bring to me. I think that would be the simplest way to put it.
It's not particularly have 2 hats on. Just go with it.
I'm not going to lie, I quite often have 2 hats on, because when I was in the studio, there would tend to be maybe a wee lineup afterwards, having a wee consultation about something. So you never lose either hat. And as I say, lucky to have 2 jobs that I enjoy. So,
lovely. Thank you. So Avi, can people find you online? Where would they go to get in contact with you or find out more about your classes?
Yeah, so they can find me online on Instagram, which would be just Dr. Avi, AVI, Sharma, Sharma, or on Facebook, and it's my full name, Avi Shal, Avichal, and Sharma. They would probably be the two main places to catch me.
Fabulous, thank you. And we like to ask our guests or invite them if there's something currently inspiring them, maybe it's a quote or something else entirely on your current yoga journey. What would you like to share with us for this?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest message for me, I would probably say is, and I say this to myself repeatedly, is to try and slow down. You know, there's a guy called Peter Crone. He's known as the mind architect, and he has a great quote, which is, most people are constantly in a rush, hoping to get one day to a place where they're no longer in a rush. And it's, you know, it's clear whatever your goal is, that perfect job, that perfect car, body, partner, or wherever you feel all the happiness might lie when you get there, it's good to just every now and again just take a step back, slow down, and try and enjoy the journey. Is it not? Smell the roses. Because I feel that's the potential to bring you more peace and happiness right now. I think that's something we can all learn to do better.
I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. So when people are rushing to get somewhere, they're rushing to get somewhere to stop rushing.
Absolutely.
Truth in that, for sure. Well, Avi, really enjoyed speaking to you today, hearing all about your stories, your insights, and the hats that you wear in your life and your living. Thank you so much for joining us on Voices of Yoga. Namaste.
Thank you so much for having me. Namaste.
Thanks for tuning in to Voices of Yoga, and we hope you feel inspired. You can find more of our free podcasts at www.voicesofyoga.com, and we are on all the main podcast platforms too. We are very open to comments and suggestions, so if you'd like to also leave us a review on iTunes, that would be fantastic. If you would like to know when the most recent podcast is going to be broadcast, you can sign up to our newsletter on the website, and we will drop you an email with that recent update. Voices of Yoga is our passion project, and if you like what we're doing and you would like to support us, it would be very much appreciated. And you can do that through a very small donation on our website on the donation button if you feel so inclined. If you would like to collaborate with us in terms of sponsorship, advertising, or even suggest coming on and being a guest, then please drop us an email at voicesofyoga@mail.com. So thanks again, and we look forward to bringing you another inspiring yoga story next week. Namaste.